We are thrilled to welcome you to all, and today I'm extremely fortunate to have Tonet by my side. So Tonet from Nexus has many years of experience in data integration and data analytics, and she's helping our customers to get insights from their customer data sets. Before we continue, maybe a little practicality. So feel free to use the chat to post all your questions. We'll be trying to do our best to make sure we can answer your questions by the end of the session, answering your questions. But so without any further ado, let's move to the subject of today, which is getting actionable insights. So about actionable insights in the context of data completeness, I think we need to make sure that we can integrate all your data feeds of the enterprise inside your data products. Getting all your data feeds into your data products will for sure increase the quality of your data products, which implies you will actually have or get more value out of it. So in this context, you must ask yourself, well, how do I do this? Because I'm sure that you will encounter everybody's challenge in that perspective. And what is everybody's challenge? The only constant in life is change. So in that perspective, how do you want to make sure you can have a successful project? How do you make sure that your data project will actually end in a successful way? In the meantime, I think that actually I have sparked your interest on the subject. So it's time to give over to Tonet. Welcome, Tonet.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to take you just a little bit, explain who is Nexus Data and what is our focus and how does this tie into the whole VaultSpeed world and what Tony explained a little bit. So at Nexus Data, our main focus is delivering value through data analytics. So at our core, we're a data analytics consulting company, and we partner with some of the leading technology companies, and we work with some of the best data analytics leaders out there in various companies. And we want to address the challenges that they are dealing with, which is mainly that I have incredible data, but it's siloed in different business applications. So unless it's consolidated, I can't turn this into value. So our solutions focus mainly on trying to increase revenue or reducing costs. So we want to add value to our businesses. And you can't do that without consolidating the data that sits in disparate sources. We know that business executives have this lingering question every time that they need to talk about data and approve data products or data software or platforms or anything. And that is, will the investments that we make in our data journey actually generate some value for us? So that's the why behind what we are doing. And we want to work with you to identify those value initiatives, to start small, to show you what value we can generate, to show you what costs we can save, and essentially transforming your data consolidation landscape. So we'll go through a little bit of detail today. And in our essence, we as Nexus Data want to build value generating relationships with our customers. We want to enable you to achieve your financial results. We've done this for the companies that you can see on the slide, and we want to help you to achieve that too. The reason why we exist and why we do what we do is, as many of you would know, there is an extremely high failure rate for data analytics projects. 4 out of 5 projects fail according to statistics. And yet those ones that succeed report that there is a 25% EBITDA opportunity in data analytics. But yet we waste, if you take the spend in 2024 of $350 billion, we waste $280 a year because of this extremely high failure rate. And we believe that the gap between the projects that succeed and the projects that don't is the focus on value. So we have made it our mission and our sole focus to ensure that we can improve the financial results of our companies, clients that we work with through data analytics. We don't want to get bogged down with the small things that'll save an hour or 2 here or there, but we want to focus on the high value, high priority, revenue generating initiatives that will drive the company towards meeting its financial objectives. So if the main differentiator in our minds is business value, then what does that look like? What does business value look like? What does it look like if you make that the focus? If you all think a little bit, I'm sure all of us have been part of successful data projects, something that you would consider that this was a success. So not that 4 out of 5 failure rate, but actually a success. What comes to mind as things that actually made this project successful? We believe that if you ask data people, they will say things like, we got the business to make decisions out of the dashboards that we delivered. We got them to actionable insights. That was a good project because they're actually using our dashboard. The thing is, if you ask business leaders the same question, they're going to say that a successful project is one that increased revenue or that improved my financial results. These are two completely disparate priorities, I'm sure you would agree. And because it's disparate priorities, the approaches to delivery is entirely different. If you focus on just actionable insights, it means that with even just one person focused on analytics, you can already deliver some insights. You can already, with a fairly simplistic, straightforward approach, you can keep on delivering actionable insights. Whereas if you want to focus on business value, so you actually want to use your data analytics to increase revenue or reduce costs, doing that in a repeatable, sustainable way is very different. So, firstly, why focus on business value? If it's so different and I need to change my whole approach, why do I need to make business value my priority? Why do I want to make increased revenue my priority? The first thing is that this is exactly what your executive team is looking for. They want to assure value. And the only way that you can assure value is that you need to embrace the complexity of it and you need to manage it. It is a complex process, but if you manage it, you can make it work. And the very important part of this puzzle is that you need to make your business case value focused. So when you decide on that thing that you're going to do as your first project, it needs to be value focused. It can't just be technical use case. So we believe that if business value is your priority, then complexity is going to be your friend. And the way that I want to explain this is by taking you through a process that I'm sure most of you have encountered. This is the normal process that a data project goes on. There's a collect piece, which is essentially getting data from your different source systems just into a single place. So that means your CSV files, your data from your applications, wherever it might be, get it from there into a central place. Then we have consolidate, which is all of the data that is now, it came from different places, it now sits in the same, let's just call it a database. It needs to actually talk to each other. If one customer on one side and one customer on the other side actually is the same customer, we need to consolidate it. We need to bring it together. Consume is the piece where we give the data in a usable format to the business users. And then value is where we say this initiative that we've just implemented, the solution that we've implemented, what value did it actually generate? So we need to measure the value, attribute the value, publish the value. So zooming into the different processes, collect or ingesting data, as some people might call it, that process can be super complex on its own. Just think about it a little bit. You need to get IT involved. There's a massive amount of different applications involved, and you get to the data and the different applications in different ways. There's some external data sources. There's different vendors that you need to talk to get the data. Very complex process all on its own. Consumption, we might think, this is easy. I just need to give the data to the business users in a way that they can use it. But this can also be very complex. It's not as easy necessarily as it looks, because you're dealing with different teams, different people that want data in different formats. Some want it integrated into applications, some want it in dashboards, some want it in Excel. It's all over the place. So this isn't necessarily as easy as we think it might be. And then the value piece, most data projects don't even do that. Even if you're working directly on increasing revenue with the project that you're doing, very rarely do we say that the work that we did in data analytics contributed to revenue in this way. So we rarely do that. And if we actually work on a project that increases revenue, we don't really tell everybody that this is the value that this thing that we did generated. This whole process is complex. There's more than enough complexity going around. So why don't we remove the complexity that we have in the consolidation process? We believe that if you can follow a consolidation methodology that is repeatable, automate whatever part of the process that you can, as much as you can make consolidation the easiest part of a process of this value chain process. Because why would you want to make something that is automatable a difficult part of a process that is already complex? And the way that we want to do that is our tool of choice is VaultSpeed. In this case, VaultSpeed does the automation of consolidation for you. So I'm going to hand over to Tony, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about VaultSpeed, and he's going to show us a little bit about this tool. Thanks, Tony.
Screen to prepare my environment for a little demo. Try it. So there are a lot of data sources we need to get into our data products. We have a lot of things that we need to integrate. And then whenever we're looking for simplifying the entire setup is indeed to make sure that we have repeatable patterns. And the more repeatable patterns you have, the more you're going to actually be able to do automation. And then looking at VaultSpeed, that's exactly what we do. We make sure that we can really do that, make sure that we can start automating the entire transformation logic. Because we know that at the end, why are we focusing on integrating those data sets and the transformation logic? Because everybody is actually facing the same challenge. So you start building data products, they run for a while, and then after a while, they will get that sync out of reality because there's a change. And then you have to re-engineer the entire, would say, data pipelining. And that's really a very labor-intensive, I would say, operations. So that's what we do. And exactly that's why we are focused on automation, to make sure we can find repeatable patterns and automate over and over again your data products, independent of the change that you actually have and you actually need to digest. You can do this through automation. And in order to maximize the repeatable patterns, to get the maximum gain out of repeatable patterns, we are looking for basically a way to render that into your model, because at the end of the day, every single data feed is really completely different at a physical layer. So we focus on getting along with that repeatable patterns by enabling your, I would say, abstraction layer, and look for repeatable patterns in a way where every single data feed token will be processed the same way. And our goal in that perspective, if you need to start creating data products in an automated way and make sure that we can handle all the data feeds from the enterprise, we in that perspective have a two-step approach. Why do we have a step approach? Because at the end of the day, the major goal of everything is let's make sure that we're going to produce a model, okay, a data product that is really fully in line with the business, the terminology, and is really reflecting that business process. Only if you're reflecting that business process, business people will see what you're talking about, and they will see basically their insights, okay, directly interpretable from the model you create. And that's what you want to produce with VaultSpeed. That's the output we're going to generate, but we need to be very conscious that we need to start using basically your data feeds, which are very different. So if you're looking about integrating information from a marketing application, so it will talk about campaigns, and it might talk about, I would say, the tiny detail of your products. If you're actually onboarding a sales application, managing your sales transactions, that language and glossary of this single application will be completely different. We need to handle that. And that's really our mission. So let's make sure we can start getting into that source environment, understand what your source is all about, and transform that in an automated way into a factory integrated model. And this step over here is where we can actually use the richness within VaultSpeed to make sure we can start implementing all those rules you typically need in data products about data consistency, about concurrency in loading processes, about data quality. All these things within VaultSpeed are automated by our templates. And guess what? These are really no-code templates. It's a really kind of way of implementing the entire, I would say, integration logic without you writing one single line of code. And once we have that integrated data set available, that factually integrated data sets, we can augment that data with business logic. And that's where you can start implementing and integrating your own business logic into VaultSpeed to make sure that we can start creating those data products that business people understand to drive their insights and make sure they can actually get the most out of their data products. And whenever going through this in multiple, I would say, discovery conversations, then I get typically the feedback. So, well, Tony, I get you. And automation is really the key to success. But we're doing automation for more than 20 years. We start using ELT tools. And then it's true that automation is not a new, I would say, way of working. Automation is here for a pretty long time. But we need to make sure that you understand basically the differentiator that VaultSpeed is bringing into the subject. So Well, if you look into the different maturity levels, VaultSpeed as a company, we are fully focused on our SaaS. In our previous life, we started about 20 years ago, really implementing data project as a consulting practice. And we started, and as a manual approach, we say, oh, fine, we need to create those data products. Okay, we are very intelligent and we know exactly very good what needs to happen with data. Let's do everything manually. And that's how we started. And then in that journey, so we'll find we need to make sure that we can improve the speed of our delivery. So let's take advantage of an ELT tool where I was using a tool to compose my logic, but then every single, I would say, logic I need to compose was actually done manually using a canvas. It was a GUI approach, but again, it was still very labor intensive. And then in that journey to getting to VaultSpeed is actually today, we'll say, well, fine. So that's ELT approach is really too manual and too much, I would say, interventions. Let's start using tools, okay, and find repeatable patterns. I mean, try to use Jinja and let's start using Java and programming languages like PL SQL to make sure that we can start doing, okay, exactly that. But then you had a very technical way of looking to your projects. And what we want to do with VaultSpeed is really give you that, I would say, comfort. Say, well, no, you're going to focus on your data products using your data language. And it's really a no-code approach, no Jinja, no Java, no SQL, a no-code approach to conceive your data products. And I can provide an idea a little bit at the end. What we actually achieved too is that with an operations, okay, using a benchmarker with the project setting that we actually have, an operation that is typically taking 70 days, okay, in a manual offer, we deliver this acceleration. We really give you, okay, that automation, okay, advantage and make sure you don't start really losing your time in that basic integration layer. That's something you can automate completely so you can actually focus on the business value. That's really our mantra within VaultSpeed. So in this perspective, we are focusing on the automation part of the entire equation. Instead of going through many slides, I think it's good to have a first insight into what VaultSpeed is all about by making sure we can provide you a demo. And then whenever looking about automation, it's really not about making sure we can start automating, okay, a few sources. No, it's about automating all your data sources of the enterprise to conceive that integrated data model. And then you will actually conceive and you will see that VaultSpeed will scale to you basically to the enterprise level. So this is a little representation of a customer of us using VaultSpeed to integrate data from 58 data sources. And every single, I know it's very little because there's a lot of detail here, but every single blue dot you see basically on the scheme over here is a business concept. And then the gray lines are really kind of relationship between this business concept. And you can see, you can really start managing a rich environment, okay, with many aspects to your enterprise, okay, in a completely automated way. And that's the idea about VaultSpeed. That's about the words. Let's actually have a look to VaultSpeed as a integration SaaS. So looking to VaultSpeed. So at the end, what we want to do, so we'll find. We want to make sure that we can start integrating data from multiple data feeds. And that's what you see over here. Maybe the screen is a little bit too small. I can actually make it bigger. So, well, whoa, what is this all? It's a lot of information here. So yes, if it's too complex, okay, let's say, fine. Let's just make sure that we can base our view here just on one single thing about one, for instance, customers and one level around this. And basically, this is actually bringing to me, this particular model is bringing information from products from multiple sources. So a little bit of background. I have a data feed coming from my sales application and I have a data feed coming from my marketing applications. And obviously in my marketing application, I'm actually managing my marketing campaigns about products. In my sales application, I'm selling my products. So well, that's where we can start integrating basically everything together and conceive that model, okay, that everybody integrates. I understand so well. I have what? I have products and my products have features. And you see my products basically are purchased because my products are part of the invoices. And then whenever looking into my list of products, in here I see all the enterprises, all the products of my enterprise with the details of my sales application and details of marketing installation. So you have the entire data lineage here. So how did we create this model? By making sure that we understand what your source is all about. And that's where you're going to actually have within VaultSpeed the capability to define, okay, what do you have in my model? So what is actually the data coming into my, I would say, landing zone? Pretty straightforward. So I have customers buying products. So if products are purchased by customers, I will actually be having invoices and invoices lines. And if I have invoices, actually I have payments. And so this is where I would going to use within VaultSpeed a very intuitive and a graphical, I would say, UI to make sure that we can start this primitive VaultSpeed. This is all about. And by providing these inputs and telling VaultSpeed, this is a transaction object. That's really a business object. Just by doing the tagging, okay, that will actually make sure that we can come into the abstraction layer, finding out repeatable patterns and making sure we can start implementing your data products without you writing one single code. And again, it's not the idea to go very detailed here. And we are very open to give you a detailed session, okay, just for you and your, I would say, and colleagues. Once you actually have come to this point where say, find this model, okay, and then if I really give you the entire stuff here, so show all, this model is really something I want to, fine. I want to actually deploy this into my environment. No big deal. You can say, VaultSpeed, I like this thing. Please start deploying that code. In which I'm going to say, before I can start deploying that code, please generate, okay, this code for Databricks. And that's where you're going to ask VaultSpeed in a no-code approach. I actually told you how my sources are like. I told you what the transaction object is. I told you what actually a business object is. I give you that integration, I would say logic. Fine, generate the code and please deploy the code. Whenever you're doing this, click on ask VaultSpeed to say, I need to define my catalogs. Cool. So in your catalogs, you will actually have all the object I was talking about that was generated by basically that model that is driving my requirements. I have here my catalog where I have basically my sources artifacts landing, I am processing them, and at the end, I create my data products in what we call a foundation layer. And then this is basically what I have at a structure perspective. And then in the meantime, it's actually been loaded. You see basically the simple data of all the things I'm actually integrating, all the details. Fine. How did I actually consume my transformation logic? We really believe that we have an extremely, I would say, advantage by using platforms like Databricks that actually scale very well and provide a huge number of services you will need, okay, to conceive your data products. So in that perspective, how will you consume the VaultSpeed integration logic? We have generated for you quite some notebooks that actually represent the code that needs to be executed to start loading and integrating your data products. For instance, if you want to see one of our codes that we generate for loading basically the data into the foundation layer, so that's the code set that VaultSpeed have generated, okay, in that perspective for one particular object. And you have seen that when I look into my entire catalog of code, that I have plenty of notebooks. I have notebooks for the staging, I have notebooks basically for the extraction. There are really a lot of notebooks, okay, that are defined to make sure we can go from your data in your landing zone into integrated data products. The question you might actually have is, fine, that's cool. I have all these code set. How do I really make sure that I can start rolling data and I don't have to worry about all this massive amount of code that you have generated? Because I understand there's a lot of complexity out there, many objects, and they all need to be consulted to create those data products. How do I make sure that I do the loading, okay, with the right, I would say, order, and also with the right dependencies, and make sure I do not miss up, okay, the code execution? Well, again, VaultSpeed and Nexus get you covered in this perspective, where we say, well, fine. So we actually started by defining the sources. We actually create our data products. Now it's time to define the flow management control. And so what is a flow management control? We say, well, fine, Databricks. And I just gave you a huge amount of notebooks, which contains all the logic I need to execute. So let's make sure we start basically loading the data by orchestrating the entire loading process. And then VaultSpeed out of the box supports, for instance, Apache Airflow, but we also very open to integrate with any orchestration capability. So that's how we actually have worked with Nexus. Also with the VaultSpeed flow management control that we actually have for generic usage, we have mapped basically what VaultSpeed has generated into Databricks tasks. So what we done, so okay, fine, I need to actually have these workflows, and this will actually give you exactly the order that you need to implement in managing the execution of those notebooks. So what we have done, okay, let's make sure that we understand what we are doing, and let's create in that perspective the workflows within Databricks, in which we're going to make sure that, well, Databricks will be the unique running platform that is going to have everything. It's going to have the structure, it's going to actually have the code in notebooks, and it also have basically the logic that we need to actually implement to start running the load in the right order. Meaning that my marketing source has been loaded a few times. I see all my statistics, all the different stacks. If I want to see how does the flow really look like, that's what you need to do, okay, to make sure it really handles the load in the right process. And that's what VaultSpeed would generate with the flow management control capability, where Nexus have actually created the mapping between what VaultSpeed generate, okay, into real workflows, okay, running inside Databricks. That you actually have Databricks as a unique running platforms from an end-to-end perspective. And running this, guess what? We'll actually make sure that we can start running the data. Now, the beauty of automation is that fine, all you see over here, so those notebooks, the model, so the catalog, everything we hear is really based on the model I've actually created so far. So if I look to VaultSpeed, this model I was showing you before, because I have this, I would say, sources and this level, I would say, of integration that I need, this actually model actually has resulted to those notebooks, that workflow, and that model. Okay, tomorrow I can actually have a new object in the source. Perfectly possible. You upgrade your marketing application, and guess what? They have a bunch of new objects. Or tomorrow you actually need to implement or integrate with another source. If I need to do this with VaultSpeed, is okay, just okay, click and play, make sure we can consume those changes. But if you consume those changes, you will actually have a new set of notebooks. You will actually have a new orchestration flow, and you're going to have a new model. Guess what? With VaultSpeed, we're going to automate the entire process. So it's not only about automating the first day scenario, but every single time you need to make sure that you change basically your model to have your model in sync with reality, where you can automate all the steps with VaultSpeed. And that's the beauty of automation. So I propose to give over back the word to Planet. And then after that section, we can again move into the Q&A part where we can answer all your questions you have. Please, Planet.
Thanks, Tony. So now that we've seen what automating the data consolidation could look like and how easy it is to actually automate, and so many things are generated for you in Databricks, and you just have to use the visual interface to do that building out of it. How do we bring the value world and this automated data consolidation back together again? So normally, once you've now seen this very interesting VaultSpeed tool and you want to implement it, you need to go and ask for budget so that you can actually implement this automation tool. And if we think a little bit about what the focus normally is, if we present to executives in terms of an automation tool and why we need to get this automation tool, the normal discussion would go something like, I'm going to compare doing this manually to doing this automated. And the end result of that is normally that you're saving in terms of time and costs when you automate. We just saw with the VaultSpeed demo how easy it is to automate. So you can imagine doing it manually versus using an automation tool will result in huge time and cost savings. And that is normally the focus. But what we want to suggest is, how would the conversation change if you made the cost savings secondary to the value that you can add? It's very important, this cost saving part of the conversation, but let's add value into the conversation as well, because it creates an even more interesting picture when you do the presentation. I want to take you through a little bit of a practical implementation of this, just a little bit of an example where we're going to use some days to implement and different costs and different scenarios in terms of value. And I want to show you practically how this could look. So I'm going to take you back to the slide that Tony quickly showed with the different days. And I'm going to use this as an example to actually show you what if this was your use case. So what if your normal use case that you want to implement where you're going to deliver some business value actually worked like this? And what I want to show you is manual versus automated. So I'm going to use the 3 days on the VaultSpeed side as my automation side to do this. And I'm just going to use the middle ground for the manual, and I'm going to use the 47 days. So let's say you have some ETL tool in place, but it's not entirely templatized, but it's also not entirely hard-coded. So I'm going to play out a little bit of a practical example here. So let's say that in your company, you can see, and we've identified that there is 10 business value initiatives that you can generate. Now, an example of a business value initiative, just to bring this maybe a little bit closer to home and easier to understand, is, for example, you want to build a revenue assurance model because you want to maximize your revenue. You want to make sure that your billing and your revenue actually talk to each other and you get the amount of revenue that you need to get. Or something like you want to increase your revenue by improving the products that you have existing at the moment. Or you have a huge problem with customer churn. So you have customers canceling and your active number of customers are going down, and you would like to protect that revenue. So not necessarily bring in more revenue, but you just want to protect that revenue. and you want to do that by responding to that customer churn. So getting those customers that are about to cancel before they do. So that's just some practical examples of normal things that could happen in a company that would be an initiative that you have to do. So let's just say, for the sake of the example, that these initiatives, each one of them can generate $10,000 per month in revenue. If you want to know if there is a specific way that you can generate or figure out what the value is, we use a concept called IFMAPI. It's one of the frameworks that we have documented in a book that's about to come out. And we take this process, we take you through this process to identify what is your initiatives, what could be the value that they could add, who is going to take a little piece of the pie here. So where are we going to attribute the revenue? We publish it so everybody is aware, and then we improve on it. So let's just say we use this process and we identify the $10,000 value for these initiatives. The first part of the puzzle we've already identified with the value that you can add. Now we need to say, how many days does it take us to get to that value if we just use one business case at a time? Taking our normal process that I explained a little bit earlier, let's just say that the collection piece of the process takes 10 days and the consumption piece of the process takes another 10 days. And then we input that 47 days from the VaultSpeed example into the consolidation there. That means that delivering a business case using a manual method would take you 67 days to get to value. If everything else remains equal, so let's say collection and consumption stays the same, and we just change the consolidation. So we only automate the consolidation piece. That goes down from 47 days to 3 days. And it means our total days to value is 23 days. So we're sitting with the 67 and 23 days. This is normally how you would deliver, right? So you deliver one business case, get that finished, get that over the line, and then you go to the next business case if you only had one team delivering. But what we need to take into account is once you've delivered a use case, there is support and maintenance that needs to happen on that use case. That means that every next delivery that you do technically will take a little bit longer if you only have one team delivering. Because your delivery in the first use case was at 100%, there was nothing to support yet. But as soon as you go to the next one, you need to allocate some of your time to maintenance and support. So every next delivery will take a little bit longer because you have this maintenance and support thing happening in the background. This is important because with every delivery, it's going to take a little bit longer to deliver it, and it's going to cost a little bit more than the next one. And especially when you're doing it manually, it means not only is the delivery of your use case manually, but your maintenance cycle is also manual. So you need to check so many things, and this kind of results in the maintenance nightmare that we see here. But the reason I explained this maintenance thing is when we do this practical example, I can't just tell you that it's going to take the fixed number of days and every single use case is going to take the same amount of time. As we go over months and years, it might take a little bit longer to deliver those use cases. What we have is our 10 use cases, $10,000 value per use case. We have those 67 workdays versus 23 workdays to deliver the use cases. And then what I've also included is this element of maintenance. And it basically goes up in a sliding scale. So we start at a lower percentage and it goes up. And you can see that the percentage that I apply for maintenance on manual delivery is just a little bit more than automated, because with automation, you have these patterns and you can make your monitoring and support easier than just with manual delivery. If I had to plot this on a graph for you, this is what the business value graph would look like. So that's $10,000 that I was talking about. So in year one, given all of the days in the maintenance, with automation, you can deliver 11 value driving initiatives. Whereas with manual delivery, you can only do 3. What that turns out to in a dollar figure is, if you just take that to 2 years, with manual delivery, you would sit on 6 initiatives that you've delivered, which would give you a value of $0.8 million. Contrast that to automated, you would already sit on 21 initiatives at $2.7 million. And obviously, with every shortening of the delivery cycle, you bring the value closer, which is why this graph, the automation dark line graph, is so much higher than the manual graph, because you can deliver quicker, which means you can bring value closer. If you take that all the way down to 5 years, this is more or less what you sit with. With manual delivery, you would be on 15 initiatives, 4.7 million in value. Contrast that to automation, where you could already have delivered 52 initiatives at 16.2 million in value. Your executives, finance people that understand business value and revenue will love a graph like this, because this means money in my pocket and not a lot of cost associated with it. There is going to, of course, be the cost and time saving question as well. I want to add the cost to this graph. So let's add value and cost in the same graph, and then you can see something like this. So just for interest's sake, cost here doesn't just include the cost of delivery. We've included some people costs in there. There's platform costs in there, because we realize that you need a platform. And then also the VaultSpeed automation tool cost, because we know that there is a big misconception about the cost of automation, because there's this additional tool that you need to include, and you need to buy it in the first year. So that is included in this graph. So what you can see with the manual consolidation there is light is the value graph, dark is the cost graph. So we can see that the first time, if we extrapolate this over years, that your value actually becomes greater than your cost is in month 55. So 4.5 years into the journey is the first time that you're actually going to be able to generate more value than cost that you've accumulated. And that point is about $4 million into the journey. If we contrast that with the automation graph, so you can still see the value is at 16 million like we had in the first graph. But the first time that these two lines cross and your value become greater than your cost is in month 9 already. So less than a year into the journey, you can already have generated more value than the cost that you've spent. And the amount there is $360,000. So a lot of a big difference there, specifically if you bring the value into the picture and not just into the cost. So just wrapping all of this up, bringing everything that we've discussed together, we believe that your primary mission as a business needs to be to unlock budget and show value if you want to go on this journey. And how do you do that? If that needs to be what you focus on, you need budget, you need to show value to get the budget. How do I do that? First practical example thing that you can take away is look through a value lens. Think about the value that you can add for the business, because that is what business people understand. And when you do that, when you go and present to your executives for approval to get an automation tool in place, don't just focus on the technical gains that you can get. Focus on the value that you can deliver and the value that can be enabled through this automation tool. Next, when you do this cost-saving exercise, because it's a huge part of presenting where you contrast manual to automation, think about cost saving, but also think about value generation, not just the one. And lastly, we've seen through this whole presentation that it is complex. It's not an easy process to make sure that you deliver value with everything that you do. So automate your data consolidation, make that the least of your worries, and then you'll be able to deliver that value a lot quicker. Just ending us off, if this interested you in any way, we have a minimum viable product, and what we can do for you is you can scan that QR code and you'll be able to book a free discovery call with us where we'll talk you through what possible use cases do you have, what we can use as our first starting small approach. We give you 2 months where you only pay for a license for 2 months. We get that business value initiative there. You get actual value, and out of that value, you have a product that you can use, and we will generate the time and cost saving and value calculation that I just showed so that you can take this journey further. Yeah, feel free to book that discovery call with us and you can take the journey further. Thanks everybody for your time. The next part is if we have any questions. I haven't checked the chat to see for questions.
I see a question on the chat, Antoinette, and let me
Right.
read out the question. So the question is, what are the common pitfalls or mistakes companies make when transitioning from data silos to a more automated and synergized data environment? And how can this be avoided? Go ahead.
Maybe go and then I can add to it.
Okay, perfect. So it's a very good question. Thanks for this question. What we see happening a lot is that, well, if you want to start taking advantage of automation means you want to make sure that you can grow your data products and reflecting your reality. And what we see happening a lot, so we're fine. I want to use automation. Cool. But I want my data products to look like this. And we start really modeling to the finest detail, to the physical model, okay, what the data product should be all about. And we spent quite some time on this. But at the end, data products is a living thing, and you want basically using automation drive basically the entire physical model and logical model, okay, by automation, and that will change constantly. What we like to do whenever focusing on automation, please put all the efforts and put all the energy in conceiving a conception model that really goes along with your needs and describes your business process. And the physical model and logical model, all that, okay, will actually be dynamically calculated, okay, depending on the sources in scope, the type of your sources, basically the scope of your sources. And that means, okay, that at bottom line, it boils down to today, I have maybe a dimension with 50 attributes. Tomorrow, automatically, that same dimension will actually have 60 attributes because you have changed the context, and the physical model, okay, will change depending on your needs you have, depending on the derived attributes. And that's something that's auto-calculated, okay, with the entire transformation logic. And what we see people doing is trying to get control into that. And that's really, okay, producing all the overheads from their side. And we can avoid this. That's my explanation from a very technical perspective. Toinette, I don't know if you have anything to add to this.
Yes, I was just thinking, yes, definitely the technical perspective and going into the detail too quickly. And I think just a step back, you need to make sure that you choose the right first thing. That first use case needs to really be something that, number one, can add value. So it's actually a business problem that you have and you can address that business problem. And it is something where a tool like VaultSpeed can shine. So it is something that you can quickly get to, but it's also something that you can build on. So you can quickly show value, but it's not something that you need to throw away at the end. You can build on top of it. So it doesn't mean that you have to, if you have 5 sources with that has customer data in it, you have to bring in all 5. The way that VaultSpeed works, you can build on top of that. So almost get to that minimum point that would really show the value and show the tool and have the tool shine through, but don't overcomplicate it in the first one. That's exactly why these automation tools work and how it builds on top of each other. And you can always just add stuff on.
Exactly. And then we'll start with 2 sources and create something that works for you, and that will automatically grow. And then you will see that basically the more things you add to your data products, your models and everything will be growing dynamically without really needing to worry about, okay, what will the final state of your model, because there will be no final state. It's a living thing. It's changing all the time.
Exactly.
I think there's another question on the chat. There's a little bit of delay for the people that are attending the session online. So we see your questions a few later, and then when you're posting them. So one of the points mentioned was making the cost approval process a non-issue. Could you elaborate on the key arguments or metrics that resonate most with decision makers when justifying the investment in automation tools?
Yeah, like we said, the decision makers are usually non-technical people. So focusing on technical things and technical ways that the platform will help you won't necessarily resonate with them. They know revenue and they know cost. So that's the things that you can focus on when you talk to them. Focusing on revenue, that means selecting that right use case, showing them that we actually have a problem in this specific area. We're losing money because customers are going away or whatever. And we use that as the example and tell them, if we can fix this issue, this is the revenue that we can save or generate when we do this. And then bringing the automation tool into that process, they understand costs and they understand the value that you can generate. So if you can explain to them, not just buying the tool as an additional cost that they have to incur, but what value that tool can add to the process, and how almost it'll start paying for itself if you start focusing on the right use cases and generating the right value. You'll save so much more, and you'll also save on time because the automation tool will deliver that value quicker than someone trying to do this manually.
I cannot agree more. And in that perspective, it's about if you're not using an automation tool, if you're not using VaultSpeed, you will go into a semi-automated approach. And then whenever it's semi-automated approach, the time to deliver, the time to value will be much, much larger. And in that perspective, you will just not be able to cover all the use cases. And if you're not covering all the use cases, you're compromising data completeness, which actually decrease the quality of your products and actually decrease the value. And then, so that's from a business perspective. And all the decision makers that are a little bit technical, they see if I start getting to a semi-manual approach, I will be dependent on the team consuming that solution. And over time, it's big risk because at the end of the day, you're going to start creating something very custom that nobody can manage anymore. And then you're going to create the technical debt. So it's first of all, making sure we have the speed of delivery because the faster we deliver, the more use cases we can actually implement. So the higher the quality of your data sets. On the other hand, from a maintenance perspective, from a risk perspective, you create something that is very difficult to manage. And that's basically what people typically see as big advantage in using VaultSpeed in the projects. Good questions.
Yes, great questions. It looks like that's all we got.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Toinette. Thanks everyone attending the call. It really was a pleasure to have this session with you. Thank you for interesting questions. And as usual, please feel free to reach out to us. So use the barcode that was provided to schedule a session. And we will be very happy to provide more insights and get you going with your data products with Nexus and VaultSpeed.